Panda, as an expert in business efficiency and burnout prevention, what exactly is burnout? And what are the signs that we're getting close to experiencing it?
Burnout is a word that we're hearing a lot lately, which I'm really excited about that there's more awareness, but it comes sometimes with a negative connotation. And so I like to give the definition of burnout as simply it's just the time, it should be only a season in our life, the time when our bodies are not physically able to keep up with all of the greatness that's going on in our minds. And to know if we're getting close to burnout, there are several physical symptoms, which I'm sure we'll cover in detail. But one thing I think that stands out is when we have a strong lack of motivation to even want to overcome the burnout. When we get to that state where fighting it becomes almost impossible, we lose motivation of fighting the symptoms of burnout. That's when we know that we're getting really close to a really dangerous place.
Hmm. That's interesting. And I wonder, and I'm glad you mentioned that, at least you point out that there are some symptoms, and I would like to know more about it. Because one thing that you said is like when we don't have the motivation of uh, fighting against those symptoms. But we hear that it is a lot about when you're an entrepreneur, when you are a business owner, when you do anything. It's not about having motivation; it's about being disciplined. So it could be confused, like, well, I don't need the motivation to fight; I just need the discipline. But if the symptoms are too strong, I don't think that you even have the capacity to have the discipline to fight against those. So, what would be the symptoms, and can we just rely on discipline, or we also need the motivation to just hit the reset button?
And that you brought up such a great word because I feel like in the high achiever realm, right? That's primarily who I'm working with is people who would consider themselves to be high achievers. Then the drive is there, the push is there. We've already pushed ourselves through so much. We've overcome so much. When we're talking about entrepreneurs, launching a business is not easy. This applies though more broadly than just to entrepreneurs, right? This can be a stay-at-home mom. This can be someone in corporate. This can be someone in a medical profession. Broadly, when we think about burnout, we have to recognize that most of the people who experience burnout have the drive. That's not a question because if you've pushed yourself to the point of burnout, most likely you are a high achiever already. So when we take that piece out of the puzzle and say, well, burnout is something that can happen to high achievers, then again, some of the negative connotation is dismissed. And we recognize it's not a lack of motivation when we recognize that burnout is a physical manifestation. It's our bodies being very smart, doing what it's supposed to do and saying, hey, you're pushing me too hard. This is not what I was built for. It's giving us the red flags. And then it's up to us as high achievers to recognize our bodies are really highly intelligent, a little smarter than us sometimes because they're telling us it's time to pause. But because we're mentally tough, we'll say back to our body, I don't have time for this. I've got A, B, C, and D to get done, and I can push through, and I'm going to overcome what you're giving me because high achievers are overcomers, right? We're going to see an obstacle and we're going to figure out how to get around it. And I can say from my own experience, I faced, and we'll talk a little bit about my story, but there was a period of my life that I physically couldn't get out of bed in the morning because my legs stopped working. And so I would lay in the bed, I would set my alarm for 2 hours earlier than I normally would have to get up. And I would use my arms to move my legs out of the bed. And then I had a process by which I would sort of shuffle around and start getting the movement back in my legs. It was painful. It was difficult. It was scary. But in my head, every single morning, I would give myself this motivational speech, right? That alarm would go off and I would say, you can do this. You've overcome this, this, and that. You can, you will. You've got this meeting at this time and it's time to go. And I would give that myself that speech. And then I would try to tell my body, we're doing this. And, and I could get it to work for a period of time. But in the long run, Is that the healthy move? Is that the smart move? Absolutely not. Because again, when our bodies are telling us something's wrong, if we don't listen, it's just going to speak louder and louder till we have no choice but to listen.
I'm glad you shared that story, and I would love to hear a little bit more because what you said there is like what many of us trying to do, just mind over body, just and we keep pushing, we can push it, and then if we strongly believe about something, it's the David Goggins mindset.
Mhm.
And sure, there's only one David Goggins, and he's whatever incredible, but but to me, it feels like okay, one, after your story, I had a couple questions. What was the reason behind you couldn't move your legs? Was it stress related? Was something else? Was just health? And the second is we understand it's not healthy. We understand that pushing our body to its limits is not healthy, especially when we are not listening to those signs. When is a time to truly stop? Because when we feel a few things here and there, it's like okay, we can push through, right? We don't. If we believe that it is something bigger than it actually is, our brains will just make that a reality, right?
Right.
Even if it's just a mild thing, it's like okay, I should rest, and then you'll have a bigger headache or just like a stronger pain, and but then the opposite is not always true. Even if you say, no, my legs are fine, at some point your body said, no, we're not fine. We're just having this issue. So when is that line crossed in the moment that we feel that okay, I pushed as much as I could, but then I couldn't overcome my body?
Yeah, what a great and deep question. Mindset is such a key thing. Without mindset, how could we achieve what we achieve? And so I don't want to ever sound like I'm contradicting the idea of that everything comes from mindset. It was the mindset that would push me to get up and keep going for a long period of time. And so it's important, but because again, I feel like so much of my message is for high achievers who are sort of like the mindset piece, that's something they're already living. We can always improve, but it's a message for people that do have that mindset and do have the ability to push through. Now, if you're an elite athlete and you have an injury and it's bothering you, they're going to tell you, we need to give you more time to heal. If you push through, you could do long term damage. But why we in business or in life don't have that same mindset to treat ourselves like the elite athlete, to say, oh, this is an injury and I need to address it because it can hurt my performance long term. So much of that, I believe, does come back to mindset, but in a different way. I've observed, of course, in my own life, but people that I've worked with, and of course, I do so much reading through my recovery process. And something I don't feel like is pointed out as often as I would like to see is that this idea of having to push through develops from our childhood and it lasts in through our adulthood. So it's so typical, right? As a child, I mean, everyone's parenting style is different, but in general, you go to school, and if you do well in school, you get awards and you get certificates and honor roll or whatever, extra little perks. And I remember in school, I won all the awards, and I never had anything but an A until I went to university, and then I was horrified with my first B at university. Like this high achievement thing started when I was the little, right? And that's often
Okay.
people's stories, right? There was something that they really excelled in, whether it was school or sports or some part of their life, and they got the pat on the back or the recognition, or their father was proud, and so they did more of that thing. And that thing is often tied to some kind of achievement. And we're taught to prioritize tasks over living a happy life. My example of that is, go clean your room, then you can play outside. Do your homework, then you can call your friends, right? It was always get the thing done, then you can do the enjoyment bit. So when we put those two concepts together, that achievement is how we're loved, appreciated, respected, and we couple that idea with this thought of the achievement is first, and then the fun comes after. The fun is always secondary. Then we can't be surprised that we grow up to be adults that go into the workplace and are seeking that approval, that respect from continuing to achieve. And the achievement is always going to come first. Enjoying life, fun, hobbies is always going to come second, because that's how we're wired and that's how we were taught from the time we enter school all the way on up through. So when I put things in that perspective, one, it allows me to give myself a lot of grace for not listening and kind of continuing that mindset. But then this idea of pushing our bodies past what is actually good for us. The best way I can explain that is to just share the point that I got to, which was sitting in a doctor's office and the doctor saying to me, do you understand that if you don't slow down, you're going to die? And I was in my
Wow.
30s. And she was explaining to me what she was seeing with my heart. She said, you have the heart of a 6-year-old woman, and I'm half that age. And so you would think that my instant mindset shift would come from that warning. It's a pretty strong warning to be in your 30s and be
Yeah.
told, you slow down or you're not going to be around a whole lot longer. And I left that appointment and I did make some adjustments, right? I started working from home on Fridays and I did some things and I was quite proud of myself. But the reality is, I just thought of it as one more thing to overcome. It was just a new challenge, right? So now I have a new challenge. It's a health challenge. And I took being a patient, as seriously. I was going to be the best patient that there could be, right? It was just one more thing to manage, instead of really putting it in perspective and saying, well, you're working so hard to save your life, but what kind of a life are you saving? What are you going to go back to? When you recover from this, what is waiting for you on the other side? And the reality is, I had really pushed aside most of my friendships. I didn't have time. Most of my hobbies and the things that I had enjoyed, I really pushed them aside in pursuit of growing a company, which I grew successfully. We grew, 50% year over year and maintained that level. But what was it all for? What kind of a life was I building simultaneously? And the reality is, it wasn't much of a life I was building. I was building a heck of a business, but not much of a life. And in hindsight, of course, now I can recognize that.
Yeah, that is. I think that most high achievers, we all most suffer from this. I think it's a coping mechanism to avoid feeling like we're not good enough or that we're not worthy of something. And it's a story that, as you said, it was created in childhood, that we needed to do something in order to get something, in order to get love or in order to get approval or recognition or validation or anything. Because at the end of the day, we just wanted to be recognized, and we forget that we are the ones who get to decide how our story unfolds, and we get to decide that we are the ones who can change that story, that narrative. Because to me, and I'm sure that to you as well, and many high achievers, you get to a point that achieving something, it wasn't even about getting that validation. Even it wasn't even about making more money. It wasn't about accomplishing a big goal. It was almost like a relief after you accomplish a relief that, okay, uh, I completed the bare minimum. That high goal became the bare minimum, and now I'm trying for something bigger and better. So we never even spent time celebrating those small victories, because even if it was small or big, we just said, okay, now I can sleep tonight. I can sleep in peace because I was able to achieve it. I don't feel excited about it. I don't have that exhilaration. I just feel a sense of relief that I was able to do it. So for that brief moment, I'm good enough. And I think that burnout, having said that, I think burnout often stems from deeper psychological patterns. You know, the perfectionism, the over responsibility, or the fear of failure. How can entrepreneurs recognize if their burnout is rooted in something other than workload?
Well, I have two answers for that one, actually. Well, more of an answer and then one a story. Uh, this was a moment in my life. So many people will ask, what was that one moment? But the reality is it's a series of moments, and that's the big moments that we remember, that we reflect on and see how impacting they were. And this one in the moment was impacting, but it became much more impacting over time. Really simple story. I was walking out to the parking lot with a business owner, and that I had worked with for years, consulted with for years, and we were leaving for the day. We were walking to the parking lot, and I had said something about my car had been acting up, and he said, "What?" It's so simple, and I'm sure he wouldn't even remember saying it. He said, "Why don't you just get you a new one? I mean, what do we do this for anyway?" And what he was saying is, why do we own businesses if not for when our car starts to act up a little bit, just get a new one? And but that phrase, like, what is it all for? What are we doing this all for? I thought, wow, what if business owners started their businesses with the very clear, what is this all for? And they actually stuck with that. Because a lot of times a business owner will start a business, I never see my children. I want to be able to be, actually be there for my children growing up, or I want to be able to travel more, or I want this, or I want that for their life. And then they get so sucked into the business that they wind up working more than they ever did. They're actually seeing their children less. They're not traveling at all, because when they were working somewhere, maybe they had a required 3 weeks of vacation, but then they started their own business and they haven't been on vacation at all. Right. So reflecting back on, like, what is it all for? And at what point have I done enough in my business? And that can be applied to really anything, not just our business, but at what point can we recognize that we've done what we need to do, and it's time to pause and reflect and celebrate what we've done before, like you said, that one night they can go to bed feeling like, oh, the relief, but then they'll wake up the next morning and be looking for the bigger table, right? You got a seat at this table, and now it's the bigger table, the bigger goal, the more money, the bigger contract. And you're right. So much of that is tied to our self-worth and a fear of failure. And if I don't, if I get my company to a certain size and I say, we're operating really great. I met a business owner a couple of weeks ago. He works in his business 1 day a month. And it's a very successful company, right? Because he's got the right people in place. That was his goal, right? So he's content for the company to not grow much larger. It doesn't have to double in size, because he's gotten it to the point where he lives the life he wants to live, and he works 1 day a month. I mean, that's the dream, right? But he could be in there every single day trying to double and triple and, quadruple the profits, but that's not what he was doing it for. And so being able to step back and say, yeah, I work 1 day a month, and not feel like anyone's judging, anyone saying, well, gosh, if you worked 20 days a month, how much money could you be making then? You're kind of lazy. You just work 1 day a month. He feels no judgment, he's happy with what he created. And so I think that getting to that place, whether it's in business or just in life, to say, you're okay with saying, yeah, actually, I just rested today, just took care of myself, didn't do a whole lot. I find that high achievers are often, when you ask us what we're doing, we're like, oh, I'm so busy. I had to do this, and next week is this, right? We're never comfortable saying, yeah, I'm not up to a whole lot, just, relaxing, enjoying life. Like, somehow we feel like we're going to be judged for that. When in reality, isn't that the dream? Like, isn't that the goal? Isn't that what we're all striving for, is to take care of ourselves and enjoy our lives? So it's sort of a funny programming. But when I talk about this, when I'm speaking to audiences about this, I have this exercise that I do, and it's very, I'd love to take your audience through it. In a room where it's happening live, as a speaker, you can always sense the mood in the room. And so I'll be talking about this, the first step of the exercise, and you kind of hear this little bit of excitement, and, it's a little bit of a buzz in the room. And then when I have people do the second layer of the exercise, you can feel the mood just plummet, and the weight is so heavy. And not that that's my goal to take people to that place, but it just is a great example of how important this alignment is. And so the first thing I ask people to do is to think about a goal. So what's the first thing that comes to mind is usually the right thing. What goal do you have right now? And most of the time, if I do ask people to say what they thought of, it's some kind of a financial goal. It may be a raise, it may be growth in their company, it may be they're ready, they've outgrown their house and they've got their eye on this bigger house. Sometimes it's a boat or a car. Often it's a financial goal, a big thing that they have in mind. And so that's the exciting piece, right? So I'm inviting your audience, what's the goal? What do you think of? What's kind of some kind of a financial goal that excites you? And then I ask the second question, which is picture yourself. So, like outside looking in, actually get a visual of yourself at the time that you reach that goal. And that's the moment that I just feel the weight in the room. Because so often we realize that goal, when I achieve it or when I get it, it doesn't actually fix everything that's wrong in my life, right? So if the goal was a boat, then I recognize, if I picture myself the day I get the boat, that, wow, if I continue working like I've been working, I'm not going to have any time to be on the boat. I'm just going to have a boat, but I'm not going to be able to enjoy the boat because I'm working and I'm pushing so much. And so when we fail to think of who we want to be or what we want for our life, when we hit that goal, when we have the new house or we have the raise or whatever it is, if we aren't changing and evolving and growing, then that thing, the raise or the house or the trip, isn't actually going to change who we are. And a bigger piece of that is so often we're living a life where we're tired and we're stressed and we're frazzled, and we picture getting to the goal and realize we're going to become even more stressed and even more frazzled to get to that goal. So when we see this image of ourselves achieving the goal, we see this rundown, worn out, tired, and stressed person. And then we think of, here's the goal and here's me, and I don't want to be that when I hit the goal. And it puts so many things into perspective about, well, why are we wanting to achieve those goals? And what goals do we want for ourselves along the journey? And that's where it starts to shift, right? Where it becomes less about the goal and more about, who do I want to be when I achieve that goal? And that's the ultimate, right? That's where we're all actually, if we're healthy and we're practicing these techniques, that's actually the ultimate goal, right? Is that we arrive at the goal happy, healthy, content, and we can actually pause and celebrate this achievement, the next achievement, whatever it is.
You know what's interesting about the way that you explain all of this, and if you think about, most high achievers have already accomplished the goals they said that were going to make them happy. Whether it was a new car, a bigger house, changing zip codes, having a promotion, growing their business, and yet they are not. I think somebody did an experiment, so a study, probably YouTube. They asked a bunch of millionaires whether you were just like 7 figures, 8 or 9 figures. They asked how much money you would need to have in order to be, I wouldn't say happy, but they pleased or satisfied. So those who had 5 million, said, well, once I get to 10 or 20, those who had 50, well, once I get to 70 or 100, whatever. And every single one of them always wanted more. Right. So always want, and to them, it's like, and I'm sure that those who said, once I get to 10, I'll be okay. No, once they get to 10, or once I get to 20, I'll be happy. So we keep we keep raising that bar, and the amount of quote unquote luck and wisdom from that guy who works, once a month is just what everyone wants. It's like, you know what? I'm so comfortable with myself. I'm so comfortable with what I achieved that I don't have to look outside and feel less than others, because now obviously the more money you make, the the kind of people you surround yourself with changes, because you are, at the end of the day, the five people you surround yourself with. So if you were in the 5 million ballpark net worth, and then you make 20, now people that are in your surrounding are 40, 50, or hundreds. But and then you feel, for some reason, I guess we feel less than others. And the moment we feel less than, oh, we need to work more, 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 more. And so it's never enough. And even if you picture, again, some people do need to achieve some goals in order for them to be happy. Once I don't have to worry about money, once I have my quote unquote financial freedom, sure, I can relax. But working towards that financial freedom builds a habit that is hard to stop. As you said, it's not that we think that people are going to judge us if we're saying that we're having a break, or we're just having a day off. At least in my experience, I don't know what to do with myself if I try to rest. I have no idea. I'm driving. It drives me crazy. I need to do something productive to some extent, and we fall into this trap of believing that we need to sacrifice everything for our well-being, and then when we realize that we don't, it's hard to leave that habit behind, because we got so comfortable to that we are so afraid to change, even if that change is positive. But every change comes with a surprising and incredible amount of loss of the familiar. So we don't want to lose that, and our brains trying to keep us, we're in a comfortable zone, even if that comfort zone is overworking. How do we get out of
Absolutely.
that trap?
Yeah, well, you really nailed it, is that we've developed those habits. And I'm not knocking, like I always say, I'll never knock the hustle, right? Like there's seasons in life where you have got to go, you've got to hustle, you've got to fight, you've got to work hard to get to a certain place. And so this is certainly, again, I'll never knock the hustle. And sometimes that's what people take away from my message. But the reality is that that should be a season of life. There are going to be periods that are extremely busy. I mean, folks that have children, right? I've got one kid in soccer, and then this one is, ballet, and then it's baseball season or whatever. Like there's going to be times that are busier than others, and that's for everyone. But it needs to be a season of our life. And when we can recognize, oh, I'm in this busy season, but there's an end in sight, that's normal, that's acceptable, that's healthy. But when that season becomes a lifetime habit, that's when we start to see more burnout. So certainly, for someone who's training for the Olympics, their training schedule, right? That's not a forever plan. They're not doing that till they're 80. That is a specific plan for a specific time, for a specific goal. And then that plan changes. And so when we, again, I apparently I have a lot of analogies that have to do with athletes, but I think one, having worked with athletes, but two, recognizing that elite performance isn't always in, not just in athletics, but it's in the workplace, it's in life. So when we're talking about elite performance, why would we not compare ourselves to athletes, right? And that mindset. So when we see that it's a season and we put specific parameters, this season will end here, and I'm doing this till this time until I reach this goal, that will help us to kind of put some guards up, right? Put some protection in place, protect from ourselves, right? That doesn't become the lifetime pattern. The other piece is, and again, with my CFO background and having had my business for 12 years, and our primary focus, we're dealing with businesses with their financials. So I see everyone's money. And so money to me has become a little bit less important, I guess you'd say, when it's, sort of what you see and deal with and work with all of the time. But in analyzing some very successful companies, I have seen that pattern of some people that are very, very wealthy who are simply not content. And then I've also seen, at the same token, I've seen some people, great example, a company I worked with, and the owner, anytime I called the office, he was playing golf. He was never there when I called. He's always playing golf. And I remember, this was years ago, but I remember having the thought, does this man ever work? I was the one being judgment. Does he ever work? Like, and if he's not golfing and he has another house like, where there's warmer weather so he can golf year round, does he ever do anything but play golf? And of course, later I could recognize this company is running well. Financially, he doesn't need, this company. He could retire today, but he continues to be involved when he needs to be. But he loves to play golf. And so what should he be doing? He should be playing golf. And that judgment side of me, I had to really recognize that and stop thinking, does this man ever work? And start thinking, isn't that amazing that he's created a structure in a business that now that he's close to retirement age, he can spend several days a week enjoying something that he loves, which in his case was playing golf. It's a mindset shift, right? It's a mindset shift to recognizing that being busy should be in seasons of life, and that we should have these clear destinies of this is a goal I have, and then I call it the pause and party, right? When you hit the goal, pause and party. Don't just be in pursuit of the next goal, because when we recognize in that high achiever mindset that we are fueled by the achievement, and we can start to do the pause and party, then we celebrate the achievement. And that helps us to be comfortable in that place before moving on to the next thing. I've never tell we should always have goals. We should have goals throughout our entire life. But this pause and party mindset allows us to actually enjoy what we've accomplished, to be proud of it, and to be mindful of the next goal that we're seeking. What is it all for? Back to the early part of the conversation. Why do we want to achieve that? Is it a lack of confidence? Is it that we have to feel we have to achieve that thing because that's how we're going to be recognized and respected? Or is it something internal where just doing that brings us joy? And if it brings us joy, that's wonderful. But if the motivation is coming from an external source, then that pause and party time and celebrating the prior goal before resetting for the next goal, that then phase, the pondering phase, is what is the next goal and why do I want to achieve that goal? And we may find that our motives are not really the healthiest of motives, and maybe that goal isn't the right fit. Maybe that's not what we need to be doing next. And so I know it's absolute, these are not the normal things we're talking about when it comes to mindset. But again, this isn't a message for the lazy, right? This is a message for high achievers to really, really see how they can have a lot more fulfillment in their life and a lot more joy and happiness in their life without always having to fear the failure or fear not accomplishing the goal. What will people think? What would they say about me? And just be comfortable in our own skin.
Yeah, sounds very, very simple, but it's so, so hard. And then you talk about, yes, being comfortable in our own skin, having the joy of working, and going back to even the examples of or even analogies of athletes. I do believe that athletes are better business owners than business owners being athletes. In what way? Because even as you mentioned, athletes are not going to be competing until the 80, but they also understand two two key components of the process and the failure, and then really studying the failures and evaluating what things they need to improve, and they know that with enough repetition they can get better because they have really mastered their skill set, but also they're aware of the off seasons. But we as entrepreneurs, we don't. And when I start running and then start training for half marathons and then full marathons, I never consider myself like I should have an off season. Therefore, I'm injured every single year because I, overrun and then over exercise.
Right.
And it's so hard because we are not wired that way. We were not trained. We were not taught how to be. We just like, okay, just push, 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 push. Once you get the goal, keep pushing. And we can learn a lot from athletes in that sense, but then we feel, for what, call it ego, call it however you want it, that, well, we are different. I'm different. I don't need an off season. I don't need this. And then I think many of us don't take, don't take, rest or burn out seriously until we are already burnt out.
Right.
And then, but there's one key thing also, Pan. There's like, even when, and I've experienced myself when I experienced burnout 4 times last year. Instead of having self compassion, like, you know what, it's okay, just
Mm,
take a rest. I was attacking myself, like, come on, dude, you can definitely just. What
yes.
are we doing? I mean, you should keep pushing. And then it's so hard because we are so wired of nothing should stop me. I should be able to do it because I see other people doing it. Well, but I don't know how other people's mindsets work.
Right.
So when it comes to that, and this is a serious problem that you have faced, many of us have faced, what can we start implementing in our life to to prevent burnout instead of, as we usually do, being reactive to it?
Yeah, what a great question, and what a great example of the high achiever mindset, that
Mm,
even when we're dealing with a physical ailment or the physical manifestations of burnout, our minds are telling us, well, you just have to push through. I mean, that's just the only answer. And that's because that has served us well throughout our entire lives, right? Work harder, do more has served us well. And because it served us well, why would we do anything different? Because that's what got us to where we are. But, now we're starting to hear this phrase, what got you to where you are isn't going to get you where you want to go. And so for me, now again, I'm very great CFO work, accountant. I'm a nerdy girl through and through. And so something that really helped me have the mindset shift was simply spending time diving into the actual science behind burnout. It helped me to recognize that it wasn't anything wrong with me, because again, we're giving burnout the definition of it's simply when our physical body is not able to keep up with all of the greatness in our minds. So it's not a mindset issue. Our mind can still be going 100 miles an hour, but our body is saying, actually, I need to rest and recover. And so when I started to see the actual science behind, for example, working for 12 hours straight, and at what point in those hours does our performance actually start to decline? And if we just set aside and say, I'm going to work for, say, 4 hours, I'm going to rest for an hour, and then I'm going to work for 2 hours, and that's going to be my whole day, that we can actually accomplish just as much as pushing ourselves to work 12 hours. And it's supported by research, it's supported by science, that getting more rest actually does improve our mental clarity. So whereas in the past I might have stayed up, I would pull all-nighters to get projects done, right? Thinking, I'll get this done, or I would work on something till 5 a.m., sleep for an hour and a half, take a little nap, and then go into the office. I slept at my office. I mean, terrible, terrible habits, thinking that, all of this time I'm putting in, I'm going to be getting so much done. And when you really look at the efficiency studies, the reality is I would have gotten just as much done if I had just gotten a good night's sleep and woken up and been refreshed. So, to answer your question, for me personally, it was getting to the point of being physically unable to keep going. So that was, I didn't have a choice. But to prevent other people from getting there, I really think that if your mind struggles with the idea of that you can slow down to speed up, if that idea just sounds like something in your gut just says, no, that can't be true, then first of all, we'd probably be very good friends, because you're my people, because that's my reaction too. And if that's you, if you're listening to that and you're saying, yeah, I've heard that, but I just don't see how I could slow down, then you're the exact person that what I'm going to say next, that this is why I'm here. This is why he's here to share this insight, is you're the exact person that may benefit from actually doing a little bit of a deep dive into the science, because your brain is questioning what you've always known. Again, we said this is what you've been taught since childhood. It's what got you to where you are. It's what's got you that executive position. It's what got you that successful company. It's what's gotten you where you are. So of course your brain is going to say, no, no, no. Get working hard and being extra, doing too much is what brought us here. So we don't need to give that up. If we do, we will fail. then I really encourage you to dig a little bit into the science. Just start reading because, again, we talked at the beginning, mindset is such a big piece. And if our brains can start to see this idea of, wow, actually, if I worked less hours, I'm more likely to perform better. If I sleep more, I'm actually likely to perform better. When we start actually tapping into the intellectual piece and letting our brains understand, it's kind of having a conversation with yourself and telling your brain, hey, we're not going to stop what we're doing. I'm not going to, but let's be open to these other concepts and just start allowing your brain to believe that these concepts, because you'll see them grounded in science. For me, that's where the breakthrough came from. Now, I have the advantage of having worked with a lot of very wealthy people, and I had the advantage of seeing firsthand, studying their lives, because again, I know everybody's income, right? I never would say, but I know what everybody makes. So I could say, this person is earning this, and this is their lifestyle. This person is earning this, and this is their lifestyle. Two very smart people, and they're earning exactly the same amount of money. One is working 60 hours a week, and one is playing golf 4 days a week. Which one do I want to be? And that's the reality is, but I had the advantage of seeing those things firsthand. Not everyone has that. So that's why I say, don't try to discipline yourself out of this habit, because that's where high achievers going to be like, starting tomorrow, I'm going to do these things, right? I'm going to work less and I'm going to sleep more. It doesn't work that way. We're too intellectual. So start with the science, start with diving deep, get your hands on some books, or just start watching people and saying, this could actually be a thing. This could actually work. And once your brain is a little bit more open to that, then that's where, you can be ready for big changes. But there's 3 simple things that I recommend people do when they say, I think I'm struggling with this, or I am a high achiever, I'm 100% all the time. And so the 3 things that I recommend: 1, just spend a little time examining your water intake. Sounds crazy, right? And it's so simple, but there's a huge percentage of the population that remains borderline dehydrated most of the time. So if you want to boost your performance, just increase your water intake and actually pay attention. And a little tip for that, it was actually a doctor that gave me this tip, and it was life-changing. Get a water bottle that you really like. I mean, really like. It's something about the way it fits in your hand, it fits in the cup holder in your car. Like, get one that you love and always use that one. It has some connection to your mindset, the same as, waking up on a cold winter day and holding your coffee cup, or maybe on a hot summer day, grabbing that bottle of beer, whatever it is. We make a connection to what's in our hand. So get a water bottle you love, increase your water intake. When we start getting dehydrated, our performance decreases by, I want to say it's about 70%. So if our mental clarity is declining because we're going 100 miles an hour and we haven't left our computer for 6 hours straight and we haven't drank any water, we're actually wasting a lot of time, right? Because hopping up and grabbing some water could actually make a huge difference in our day. So that's number 1. Number 2 is sleep. Now, some people need more than others, right? And we can teach ourselves, we can get in a pattern of, I only need 4 hours of sleep, but actually we're chronically fatigued at that state. But something about sleep, when people say, well, gosh, I can't wind down to go to sleep. Very common amongst high achievers, the ability to wind down. So what I recommend is setting a timer on your phone that is your wind down timer, right? So that an hour before you're going to bed, I have mine almost 2 hours before. I won't say her name because she'll turn on, but it's spelled Alexa, has a whole system. One time she just started playing music. She thought I was talking to her. She started playing music during a podcast. It's kind of funny. But a whole system of dimming the lights and changing the lighting and things like that in the house to kind of be prepared for winding down. Turning off screens and maybe reading before bed, something most of us are phones and TVs and laptops right before bed, and that doesn't allow us to wind down. So if you have a timer that says, this is my wind down time, and it's 30 minutes to an hour before bed, you actually are, one, more likely to fall asleep faster, two, likely to get better, more quality sleep if you give yourself a little bit of a wind down time. But if you're like me, I mean, I would be working until it's like, oh, it's 11 o'clock. I got to go to bed. And I would try to go straight from my computer to like wash my face, brush my teeth, and go to bed. Not going to get the best quality sleep, right? So that's the second one. And then the third one, as simple as it sounds, we all could be eating healthier. And I'm not going to give a big speech about, all this healthy eating. I tell people, try to start with one healthy meal a day. Just one. Make that the goal. High achievers are like, nope, tomorrow I'm starting and I'm doing, a whole 30. We don't have to do that, right? Because we're gonna burn out even of that. So I say start with one healthy meal. I remember when I was working all the time, it was DoorDash and eating at my desk, and I didn't even pay attention to what I was eating. It was just like whatever can get here the fastest. I didn't have good routines and good patterns, and I was lacking in nutrition. So that's something we can all do, is just add one healthy meal a day. Maybe it's dinner, but it doesn't matter what meal it is, but just start there, and don't try to create this whole new revolution that starts tomorrow. Start with three simple things, and then that will hopefully give you a little more energy, help you to be recovering a little bit better.
So it's interesting about you said about sleeping. Again, those three habits: just more water intake, better sleep, and better food. One of the things about sleeping that many people feels like, well, I don't need to sleep as that much. I can be okay with 4 or 5 hours. If you truly think about it, right? If we didn't need to sleep that much, we would have evolved that part. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, being asleep for 8 or 9 hours when we are, cavemen, were just the most dangerous thing. Like any predator would just go and get us, right? So even if we need it back then, that means we need it now. And it's funny how we tell ourselves, no, no, I think I'm okay with 5, 6 hours, and then the burnout comes. And when it comes to when you said about being intellectual and really trying to be nerdy and read about it, it's funny because I've done that, but I'm also very stubborn. When I started running, I did a lot of research. I became such a nerd to say, how can I get faster the quickest? And everyone says a slow run, and then you build over time, and you will get faster. But even with when it comes to working and productivity, even though I've done that research, if you read the Carl Newport book, Deep Work, you know that if you have blocks of 2, 3, 4 hours of deep work, you're gonna be more productive than working for 8, because at some point you get diminishing returns because your brain is not as sharp. And yet, in my case, it's just hard to I can do that in sports, I can do that when it comes to my training cycle, but it's so hard to do it on the business. And I think, at least for a lot of entrepreneurs, especially in the early stages, we have to wear multiple hats. The CEO, the marketeer, the accountant, the HR, everything, right? How does this constant role switching contribute to the mental fatigue and decision making? Because I think that is a main contributor of burnout, and feeling that we're not doing enough, just because every time we switch, we just have to start over. And then, well, even if I have deep work for 4 hours, I need to work 8 or 12, but then I'm not getting the results I'm looking for because I'm mentally exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be a vicious cycle, and that can be a season when you are starting your business. You don't have the luxury of playing golf 4 days a week, right? That phase where the hustle has to be so much a part of the mindset. And so I do have a whole system I've developed called Schedule Your Success that allows for time blocking, allows for boundaries, allows for prioritizing. But when you're first starting a business, like everything feels like a priority, right? It's hard to say, well, I'll delegate that. Well, it may just be you, or you may have a small team when you're first starting. And so who are you going to delegate it to? And so that is a constant challenge. And I think that that's an important part for people who are just starting in business to recognize two things. One, this is a season. Yes, it's going to be busy. Yes, you're going to wear all the hats. And two, right? So it's a season, and you don't want it to be a habit. But the second piece of that is What things are you doing that you think you have to do because you're starting a business? And what things are actually moving the needle? And that's a huge, huge gap when you're first starting between what are the actual priorities and what things do you just think you need to be doing, because that's what everyone does when they start a business. Because in a couple of years, you'll recognize, oh boy, I wasted a lot of time because I thought I needed to be, I thought I needed to be at every networking event, or I thought I needed to be, it'll be something that in hindsight, you'll recognize, boy, I wasted a lot of time on that. But for the new business owner, and even for the seasoned business owner, what are the things that actually move the needle when we take ego out of it, right? Do I have to be on social media every day? Do I have to have this spectacular website? Do I have to, like, what things are really important for the business and what things are just things that I should have, but I have to sort of let go of the perfectionism? So for the new business owner to the seasoned business owner, what are the priorities? And is there anything that you can let go of that you have an ego connection to, where you are doing it because of how people view your business or you because you do that? If it's not if it's not moving the business forward or it's not creating profit, those are the things that can go. And that will help the business owner to create more free time in their day by letting go of low priority tasks.
Yeah, I think that many of us, many entrepreneurs, we sort of know what moves the needle, and but that one is such a it creates such an emotional response because it makes it uncomfortable. There's some sort of anxiety or fear or overwhelm, and then we just pay attention to the low value task because at least we feel that we're doing something, but reality
Mhm.
we're just avoiding the
Right.
that one task that is moving
Right.
the needle, and we know that. And
Right.
that's when we get frustrated with ourselves because deep down we know, but we're avoiding it because again, if
Mhm.
it was easy, everyone would be
Right.
doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that
Yeah. It's
I
that.
found myself doing it a lot.
Yes, and I have to say this. I'm going to make a comment about that productive procrastination. But everything we're talking about today, I'm also working on myself. I have not mastered all of these things. Do I still have days that I have my laptop in the bed at 10:30 and I'm saying, "Oh gosh, I got to start winding down"? Absolutely. We're talking about, this is the nitty gritty. This is not the easy stuff to do, and I am certainly have in no way perfected all of these things, that I'm doing them consistently 100% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, but none of us are perfect. And so I don't want anyone to feel like judged or feel, gosh, I'm so far from that. These are all things that I've developed over the past couple of years, again, after nearly losing my life, right? I'm preaching to the choir, I think is the expression, or the pot calling the kettle back black. I don't know. There's so many different expressions for I'm talking to myself when I say this. Um, but productive procrastination is something that I find myself being guilty of more often than not, or more than I would care to admit, because the feeling of getting things done and knocking things off the list uh, is greater sometimes than the feeling of having done something that does move the needle, but we don't see the return instantly. So that short-term gratification of being able to check something off the list is more appealing than, in our minds, than this gratification of, maybe I have something that it does move the needle, but I need to spend 4 hours a day working on it to see that result. It's just not that instant gratification. And that's why I use this scheduling and time blocking system that I developed, because it really it puts the tasks in order of priority, so I don't have any choice but to do the high priority tasks. And if I get to the end of the day and I've somehow misgauged the amount of time, the only things that are left at the end of the day are the low priority tasks that can be done another day. But so often we start with the easy stuff and the stuff we're good at, and leave the stuff we don't want to do or the stuff we don't think we're good at till the end of the day. And then the end of the day comes and we're like, well, I guess I'll just have to do it tomorrow. And tomorrow turns into the next day and the next day and the next day. And so, yeah, I, I, I am definitely guilty of that productive procrastination mindset.
Yeah. Totally. And it's interesting because we know, at least if you're very curious, high achiever, go getter, you know that your mind is the sharpest in the morning. So you have to tackle those hard things that move the needle in the morning. By the time it's afternoon, you don't have the brain capacity or the mental bandwidth to deal with something like that. And that's why, a lot of entrepreneurs say just eat the frog first and then just
Right.
get get it over with. But again, as we said, it's hard because it has that emotional response that we are avoiding at all costs. I think that if we become aware first, and then, okay, I'm experiencing this, I understand, I know it, and yet I'm going to do it anyway, even if I just advance one small step. But as you said, we don't see, many times we can do the same thing for 6 months and see no results whatsoever. And eventually it will just click and then, okay, now we see it. But do we have the emotional stamina to withstand just keep doing the same thing over and over without seeing results, but knowing and believing that we will be able to reap the benefits at some point down the road? And that is the hard part of being an entrepreneur, I guess.
Yes. And why my business exists, right? As a business advisor, I'm working one-on-one with business owners who may need that support or that encouragement or someone to, help them identify this is the thing that's moving the needle, and then this is where maybe the time is being wasted because these are the tasks that are not, as it turns out, moving the needle. And, and that assurance of we're headed down the right path. I'm here to support and encourage you and help them to see that, this long-term plan does pay off. And fortunately, we have a whole system that allows us to compare companies to best in class companies and what are their priorities and what are their focuses. And we can do that through our software to help really pinpoint where are the areas that need to be strengthened and then focus on those. And so often those areas are not what the business owner wants to work on, right? It's not that the thing, it may not be the number one thing that they enjoy or the thing that they considered a priority until they actually see it from someone else's perspective. So that's just a really fun part about what I get to do as a business owner is provide that support and encouragement when people are in tasks that do have that longer payout.
Yeah. And I think that you help a lot of business owners by creating accountability, because now, okay, not only but I know that you have to do this. So if you don't do it, that now it's on you, and it's not on the system, it's not on the or whatever. So it creates that sense of urgency, which many of us need. Panda, I've been having such a wonderful and insightful conversation, and I had so many different other questions to ask, but clearly we ran out of time. But as a closing question, what are the failures you cherish the most?
The failures I cherish the most. What a great question. Well, This this is just the first one that popped in my mind, and
Mm,
maybe it's. I always say, "What's the first thing that comes to mind?" It's probably the right answer, and
yeah.
it's seeming like an odd answer, but I'm just going to roll with it. So, um, 20 years ago now. I'd like to pretend it's 10 years, but let's be honest, it's 20. I was competing, I was modeling at the time, and I was competing in the prelim for Miss America and the prelim for Miss USA. And so fun time in my life. And I recently saw a picture of the moment that the former queen was handing my bouquet because I was the runner up. So it's literally a picture of what was to date at that time in my life my greatest failure, right? Because I lost. Even though I was a runner up, and again, that high achiever mindset. It's like doesn't matter you were top
Mm,
5. If you didn't
yeah.
win, it doesn't count, right? And
Mm,
instead of being really proud of making top 5. So that photo of me with my fake smile, because you have to keep smiling because you're still on camera, but really you're just told you've lost. Here's a bouquet of flowers. Kindly stand over there so we could bring up the winner. And that was the moment that was captured in that picture. And at that time, it was, of course, so impacting because I had worked so hard. But now looking back on it, I recognize so many things that happened as part of that event actually really shaped my life. So I was in the best shape of my life and I learned so much. I did just an amazing fitness coach that helped me to develop some habits. I had an interview coach. So now I'm in interviews all the time. And so if I'm being interviewed on a podcast or by a journalist, I had an interview coach that helped me to understand the dynamics of an interview, never knowing that 20 years later, I would be being interviewed all the time. I had a wardrobe coach. I did win the fashion award. Thank you very much. But I had a wardrobe coach. And now, again, 20 years later, I just recorded a video this week for a media training event about what to wear on camera when you're being interviewed in the news. Where did I learn that? I learned it from my wardrobe coach in pageants 20 years ago. So I say all that to say that looking at that picture that captured what at 19, 20 years old was my greatest failure thus far, when I look at that picture now, I think, wow, but I learned so much. It wasn't a failure at all because it's unlocked so many doors for me and opened up doors for modeling opportunities. And it did so much in my life, even though at the moment it felt like a failure. So I say that to say, even as we're experiencing failures now, the lesson sometimes is so much greater than the perceived failure in the moment. And so I'm actually really proud of that moment now because of everything I took away from that exact moment.
I love it. I love it. In hindsight, everything makes sense. Yeah, but
Right.
in the moment, it's like, can we have the wisdom, now,
Right.
so
Right.
we can be okay? So yeah, it
Right.
just, and this is a phrase, a concept I've been bringing back a lot in the podcast and other areas of my life, because I heard about or even read about this probably 2 years ago, and it really changed my mindset in a way how to deal with failures, with obstacles. Have you heard about the ironic tragedy? What the
I have
ironic
not.
So the ironic tragedy of life is that life has to be lived forward, but it only makes sense in reverse.
Hmm.
So only when we have enough time of separation between an obstacle, a setback, at a health crisis or a failure, we understand and we know that even though we never wanted that to happen, that needed to happen to shape us who we are today. So every time I'm facing something, I think about that. It's like, okay, I will be able to see it, not now, not in 6 months, maybe not in a year, but at some point I'll look back and say, I'm glad that happened. So
Yes.
it's the only thing that keeps me pushing forward. But yes,
Yes.
I can
And that's
tell you.
wisdom. That's the wisdom to say, this is difficult now, but I know something good will come from it. And then the gratitude for the curveballs that sometimes life throws at us. And I think that is a huge, when we talk about mindset, that's one of the biggest separators from people who have a tragedy and it launches them into something greater, and those who have a tragedy that holds them back for the rest of their life. And you've really just nailed the difference in the mindset between those two.
Yeah, using obstacles as not as a barriers, but as a teachers. And that's just like, this is happening for me at some point. I need to learn the lessons and keep moving forward. But yeah, I really, really love that answer, because again, it probably was the best answer that you could give based on the first thing that popped in your mind. Because even though probably you were a lot, clearly 20 years ago, a lot younger, a lot more naive, and then those, you didn't have the wisdom that you have today, and that moment was way more painful than if you had experienced that today. So
Right.
you had to learn from that. And Panda, once again, it's been a complete pleasure. I do have to bring you back at some point, because there were so many different other questions about business efficiency and productivity and burnout that we didn't have enough time to address. But where can people find you? I know that you are going to release a book soon, but you also are a speaker and you help businesses. Anything?
Yeah, always say the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well as Facebook. So I'll make sure you get those so you can include them in the show notes. And folks, if you do reach out to me, send me a message, let me know you heard me on this podcast. And if there was something specific that resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, I'll include all of those in the video, show notes, and YouTube description. Once again, Panda, was a total pleasure, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.